Introduce our latest project, 403 Aurelius, as well as go over a few of the things that I will be using during these streams. So 403 Aurelius is just an experimental project that we've thought up wherein we are going to be streaming as much of development as possible and just generally making the inner workings of it public. So at the moment, we're not planning on having any public betas, public alphas, or anything like that, but you'll be able to check in whenever and see where development is at, what we're currently working on, and in most cases, watch us as we work. So up here at psr.repositoryhosting.com, which will have public access for you guys, we have a page set up for the mod, and it's just going to contain, well, first off, lots of spoilers, but also an overview of, what it's about, who we are, and just every detail that we've come up with so far. It's all going to be put up there, and it's going to be available for you guys to read. Now, my role is primarily a level designer. That's what I joined the team as back when we were working on the Hazard course. But it's also kind of evolved to be a jack of all trades. I also do environmental art, mostly 2D, or 3D, mostly 3D, some 2D. I've become somewhat of an audio engineer as well. I've worked on more or less all the choreography for the Hazard course, so I'm probably going to be continuing to do that with 403 Aurelius. And lost my train of thought here. This is probably going to happen a lot. Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was also the I guess you'd call it lead writer for the Hazard course. I was not the original lead writer, but the person who we had brought in to work on the script had to step down due to, real life considerations, and he was going to focus on his actual job as a script writer and spend his time working on that rather than, a free mod that he would be losing money on. So I kind of had to step into that role and take over. But for 403 Aurelius, I'm not the only lead script writer. So, hopefully, if you didn't quite like the direction Hazard course took, you'll like this a bit more, because there's going to be, more cooks preparing the soup, so it's not just going to be tailored to my tastes. So, first up, we have to go through the software, because I'm sure a lot of you are going to be asking, what software are you using? So the first thing we have is the Hammer editor. That is our level design tool, which is currently not configured for the mod. I have to get around to doing that. But the Hammer editor allows you to create Half-Life 2 levels, basically. Levels for the source engine. And, it's pretty... I mean, compared to some editors, it's pretty basic in that, it's not like the Creation Engine's creation kit where literally everything involved in creating game content you do in the creation kit. Hammer really only does levels, but that's all it really has to do. And honestly, I find that it's a lot more stable because it's just doing that one thing. So you're going to probably be seeing a lot more of Hammer as time goes on if you tune into these. But that's not the only tool I use. So let's move on. There's also the just the other tools included with the Source SDK, such as the Half-Life Model Viewer, which does exactly what it says on the tin, and also Face Poser, which is the dedicated choreography tool that the Source Engine uses. So you probably won't be seeing too much of this for the first little bit until we have a finalized script and voice actors and whatnot. But right now, I have this configured for Black Mesa from working with the hazard course, and it just allows you to, plop in models for actors, give them, stuff to do, lines to say, facial expressions, stuff of that nature. So like if I open up, let's go from here. Like this line here from the Male Observer.
Well, not all of it, of course.
That's the Male Observer voiced by Kevin Sisk, who is also the voice actor for the security guards in Black Mesa. He was kind enough, along with all the other Black Mesa voice actors, to use their skills for the hazard course. But Face Poser allows you to like scrub through the scenes. Timing, it's halfway between an animation tool and a video editing tool, honestly. And then it saves in this proprietary VCD format that the Source Engine uses to just store those scenes. And it's a really useful tool. It's also, as you'll notice around here in this corner, it's a little bit broken. The icons are missing and some functionality just doesn't work anymore. For instance, there is a lip syncing tool in this for creating phonemes, and that does not currently work because the speech SDK that Valve currently uses is well, due to legal reasons, they can't distribute it. So that kind of broke things. So their public version of Face Poser is configured to use an older version of the Speech SDK, which can be distributed, but it also doesn't work on anything higher than Windows XP. And I have a Windows XP machine, but it's quite old and it doesn't have a wireless network card. And the apartment I currently live in does not have Ethernet, so I'm not going to be able to stream that portion of development, doing all the lip syncing, because I'm going to want to do that automatically with the Speech SDK, because doing it manually is just a huge pain in the ass. So that's about all that we are likely to use from the SDK. But there are other tools used for development, like Photoshop is used for, of course, all the textures. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. I'm going to be using Photoshop for the textures. I believe Chris uses GIMP, which is another photo editing tool. It's the open source freeware one, and it's pretty good. I personally don't think it's as good as Photoshop, which is why I stopped using it once I got access to Photoshop. But it is competent, it holds its own, and you can download it right now if you want to and start getting into that. Another thing I use is Blender, which is a free modeling software that just allows you to make models and has a very good set of source plugins. So just load it up here, and let's see what we have here. AK-47 model from 2013, which I never finished. So I made this in Blender, an older version of Blender, I guess literally 3 years ago. Never finished it. But Blender allows you to model things, it allows you to rig them up to skeletons, UV map them, and then you can use Photoshop or GIMP or Paint.net or whatever it is you use to make the texture from that UV. So when making model-based assets, I'm going to be using Blender, Chris is going to be using Blender, other members of the team do different things, use different software, like Mike prefers Cinema 4D, which is a commercial software. I can't remember what anyone else on the team uses at the moment. But you have lots of options. I also have Maya installed on my computer because that came with my school licenses. Because our program uses Maya for its 3D modeling. I don't really like Maya all that much. Some people swear by it, some people say it's better than Blender. It's really a matter of preference. But because I'm more practiced with Blender, I'm more used to the interface, which is admittedly a non-standard interface for this sort of software. I just prefer Blender, but Maya is a thing as well. Well, we don't need to have it actually open because I'm not going to be using it. In the way of sound editing, I use mostly SoundForge Audio Studio for that's Maya. Just gonna so there's a Maya interface. You're not going to be seeing much of that. Anyway, so I use SoundForge for most of my recording purposes and some of my editing purposes. I've had this for, coming on like 8 years now, I guess. I've had it for quite a while. It's SoundForge Audio Studio 9.0, so it's very outdated. It doesn't have a lot of functionality that newer software has. But for just the basic utilities, it's pretty good, so I keep having it installed whenever I have to reinstall everything on my machine. There's also Adobe Audition, which I have a copy of, again, courtesy of my college, which is also very useful for sound editing. I used this to get some of the post-processing effects that we use in the Hazard course. We made it in Audition. Also for the any post-lip sync editing, because one of the things that SoundForge does, which is technically a good idea, but not actually, is that if it finds any kind of information that doesn't match the file format or its metadata, it just kind of cuts it out, which is a good thing to help prevent corruption of the file, but it also removes the phonemes, which are they're basically just the things that tell FacePoser what what shape the mouth is doing, basically. Phonemes are the building blocks of words, which I'm currently failing at. But let's just open up some Hazard course files here so I can show you. Here. So this is a line for Dr. Bickford as voiced by Josh Jones. Again, from the Hazard course. Dr. Bickford is probably not going to have an appearance in Hazard or 4.3 Aurelius, but you never know, maybe we can get Josh to help us out with that.
Time to leave the nest, Freeman!
So, as you just heard, it just automatically adds kind of a radio effect, and there's a bunch of options. So
time to leave the nest, Freeman!
Just loop this and play it.
Time to leave the nest, Freeman! 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 Time to leave the nest, Freeman!
Anyway, so it has a whole suite of effects that you can add on and customize, and it's really good for that sort of thing. It's really good for audio editing, and I should probably learn how to use it a bit bit better than I do. I'm sure that'll just come with time. Another thing that we on the team use a little bit is Fruity Loops Studio, which is technically composition software for music, but you can also open up some WAV files in it. Not like that though. Here, let me just bring up something. My other monitor. I'm not going to be streaming my second monitor because that would just not make for a good viewing experience. But I do have a second monitor because it helps my workflow. I can have, well, for one thing, OBS is over there, so I can keep an eye on stuff while I'm streaming. And also just allows me to have reference images, allows me to bring up chats and stuff. If you're getting into game development or any kind of digital production and you can afford to, get a second monitor. Sometimes even a third monitor, because every additional monitor you have up to a certain cutoff is just more information you can have at your fingertips, and it's just better. But if I bring up another, we can drag this in here.
Finally, Simowitz, he's here.
It's another line for Dr. Bickford, and I can just, somewhere. I'm not overly confident with FL Studio. I haven't used it all that much, but what I have used is actually Kevin Sisk gave some post-processing files from us. He was kind enough to share his method for creating the tram announcer for Black Mesa, so that when we had Victoria come in and record some new lines for the Hazard Chorus, she's the voice of the tram announcer, and she recorded some new lines for the Hazard Chorus, and then Kevin shared his post-processing sequence for it, so it came out sounding really, really close to the original one, because it was doing the same thing. But if we just bring in some post-processing in here, we can... I'm not really going to do much with this. I'm just going to show, what it does.
Finally, Simowitz, he's here. Finally, Simowitz, he's here.
There, turn it on.
Finally, Simowitz, he's here.
Anyway, there's just another audio editing program that you might see me use a few times. I have the free version, so it's going to pop that up every time I close it, because I don't have money. Anyway, yeah, so that's essentially the bulk of the software I'm going to be using. Other developers will be doing other things. They're going to have other workflows. But, for me, this is basically what I use. So hopefully that'll just, clear up any questions you had. Hopefully, I won't have to repeat myself, because that will just take time away from development if I'm constantly answering the same questions. Anyway, one other thing we do use is Subversion, which is a form of version control, which basically allows us to not only share our changes with everyone else on the team, but say I go and oops, I accidentally deleted a bunch of the game files. Well, that's fine. I can just go back, and in this case I just have to update it again, and it'll restore those files. Oh, actually did not restore all of those files. Why did it? Maybe it did. Zamal sounds like cache. I think the game state, and not that one. But I mean, if they're not in the repo, they're not important. They'll just be regenerated by the engine. Or let's say, if I go in here and I accidentally just boom, I just broke everything. And let's say I accidentally commit this, broke this for stream purposes. We'll roll back. And I committed this broken version of the game info.txt, and now the game will literally not run. I can just go back and update to revision. Show the log. It'll load for a bit, so I can go back and update to revision 11. And we'll do that, and I pop it open, and it's fixed. I'm probably gonna have to just I probably don't have to do this. I'm just being sure. Oh, because it's out of date. Cancel. Cancel. Yeah, see, I figured that, the version I have is not the one that's in the repo, so even though it's not showing up as such, it's kind of not the best thing. Anyway, so I'll update it, and I'll bring in the broken version. I can just drag in the unbroken version, replace it, and then, oh look, it's out of date again, so I can commit it. Fixed game info.txt on stream. That's not how you spell stream. So I cannot stress how important version control is if you're doing any kind of computer science or game development or even art project. Especially if you're collaborating with other people, but even if you're working on your own, you should probably be using version control just in case you screw up. Because otherwise, when you screw up, your work will be gone. Unless you can fix it manually on your end, you're just euchred. You're gone. So yeah, use version control if you can. And oh, there's actually a couple more tools I forgot about. Well, actually, at the moment I only have one or two installed, but there's Crowbar, which is an excellent utility for decompiling and compiling models. Decompiling is taking a finished model and just ripping it apart back into its source files. You can see here that I decompiled the CSGO drinking fountain a while back because I wanted to get the measurement, so I had a rough baseline for what my own drinking fountain model would be. Because I was making the same kind of drinking fountain. I didn't want to go steal the model, but I wanted it to be similar. It also has compiling, which is, taking the model and from its source files, making it something that can be run in-game. And compiling happens with basically everything the source engine uses. You compile maps, you compile models, you definitely compile code. It's all just making it into stuff that your computer can run in the context of a game. Or for code, just any context, really. If you don't compile your code, it's not going to run. Even if you do compile your code, sometimes it doesn't run. Other things I use are Notepad++, which you saw earlier when I was editing this game info.txt. It's just basically a super more powerful version of Notepad that can also easily do programming. It's got a bunch of different programming languages, so you can have the syntax for those in. It's got a bunch of extensibility, so you can add your own plugins, which I don't really have too many of. But I mostly use it just to write notes for myself, but programmers get a lot more use out of something like this. especially if they want to just, work on code really quickly without having to boot up an IDE, which takes forever. And I'm sure Ryan will, talk about that a lot. Actually, he was doing that when he was streaming his compiling of mod code for the first time, because he had to do that in Visual Studio, and that's the most commonly used IDE. It's pretty good, but I'm sure a lot of programmers just don't like having to have that kind of bulk. And there is one more other thing that we use on the team for the source engine specifically. Just going to go into this project I was working on my own, and that is VTF edit. A VTF is the texture format for the source engine. It's Valve texture format. It makes sense. And it just takes, a raw image file, usually a PNG or TGA, and it converts it into a format that the source engine can read. And it also creates VMT files, which are Valve material textures. I think the T is texture. Maybe it's to format, I don't know. But they're Valve materials, which take the texture and a bunch of other data and make it into something that meshes together in game as sort of a material. So you might have plastic, and plastic will it'll have a plastic texture. It'll have maybe a normal map depending on how rough it is, and it'll make sounds. So I'll just knock on my plastic laptop, and that makes a different sound than wood. It's just basic real world stuff applied to the game. For this particular material, we have a base texture, which is just the texture. There's a bump map, which is actually a normal map. I'm not going to get into that rant today, but basically, the source engine handles both traditional bump maps and normal maps, but they don't call normal maps, they call them bump maps, even though it's a different format. I'll get into that another day, I'm sure. Also tells the material to get an environment map from the nearest cube map, which is something I'll have to expand upon later. It's basically an entity you put inside Hammer, and then when you run the game, you can build the cube maps, and it'll take 6 photos, basically, from the cube map's position and use that for reflections. It also has an environment map mask, which is also commonly known as a specular map, which defines how shiny something is. With most engines, it's black is not shiny, white is super shiny. I can't remember if Source works like most engines. I'll have to look that up later. It's been a while since I made a specular map for Source. But it defines basically how reflective a surface is. It gives you the surface properties here, which is brick. So if you hit it with your crowbar, or you throw something textured with that material down a flight of stairs, it's going to sound like bricks falling down a flight of stairs. Keywords are just stuff so you can find it more easily in Hammer. I use my own name as well as Chris's username, because he's the one who gave me the original source files for these textures. Thanks for that, by the way. They're really, really nice brick walls. There's also the environment map tint, contrast, saturation. They just affect how the reflections look. There's a whole bunch of different material parameters. There's too many to get in right now. But just know that the material and the texture are separate things, but when you combine them, they become what you see in game on literally every surface. And I think that's about everything I have to go over. So I hope that cleared up some things for you guys. I hope that enough detail for you guys to help get into the project. And if you have any questions, you can always go to psr.repositoryhosting.com, go to the 403 Aurelius page, and you will show up here and get literally all the information you should need. So, you know, you don't have to ask any more stuff like any progress, is it dead, how close to completion are you, because you can look that up on your own now. And that's what this experiment is for. It's to see what happens when literally anyone can just pop their head in and see, you know, what we're working on and how well we're doing it, which is usually not very. So anyone can watch, anyone can see what we're up to. Not anyone can make edits. That's going to be team members only. But you can always, you know, check in and see what's going on. And hopefully this will give everyone an appreciation for, you know, what goes into game development and why it takes so goddamn long. Especially when you're a team of modders who only has their spare time to work on it rather than doing it for their day job. Yorick. Good times. Anyway, so I think I've about covered everything, and I will see you guys later. JeffMod out.